The stars shone brightly in the cold expanse of space, their light almost mocking the fragile vessels that traveled beneath them. The fleet of alien warships hovered in a perfect formation, their sleek, dark exteriors glimmering under the distant glow of the stars. These were no ordinary ships. They were designed for war, each one a symbol of the alien species' power. The commanders on board these ships believed they were unbeatable. Their technology was far ahead of anything humanity had ever known. They thought that no one, not even the strongest creatures of the universe, could survive what they were about to do. But there was something about the humans, something that made the alien commanders curious. The humans were the perfect test subjects. They were weak compared to the mighty creatures that roamed the universe. Their technology was primitive, their weapons nothing more than toys in the face of the alien power. The alien commanders had decided that humans would be the perfect beings. To test their theory, they had already conquered countless worlds, crushed entire civilizations, and extinguished the strongest species. But the humans, they were different. They were stubborn, determined, and had a strange ability to survive. The plan was simple. Send a group of humans to the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, a Class 15 Deathworld, and watch as they were wiped out by the hostile environment and deadly creatures that lived there. Class 15 Deathworlds were known for their extreme conditions, filled with unrelenting storms, poisonous air, and creatures so deadly that even the toughest species could not survive. The aliens believed this would be the end of the humans, their extinction, a mere footnote in the history of the galaxy. But as the humans were loaded onto the transport ships, there was no fear in their eyes. In fact, they didn't even fully understand the danger they were about to face. They had been chosen for this mission because they were considered expendable, not because they were special. They were told they were going to test a new form of space exploration, one that would help humanity expand into the universe. None of them knew that the true purpose of the mission was much darker. On the alien warships, the commanders gathered around their holographic displays, watching as the humans' ships disappeared into the void, heading toward the death. The fleet was stationed just outside the atmosphere of the planet, and from there they had a perfect view of the humans' descent. It was all part of their plan. The humans would land on the planet, be exposed to the dangers of the environment, and perish. The alien commanders would then report back to their leaders, proving once again that no species could withstand the power of the alien race. The fleet of alien warships was silent, save for the soft hum of their engines and the occasional beep of communication signals. The commanders were confident. Nothing had ever stood in their way. They had crushed countless species before, and this would be no different. They watched, eager to see how long it would take for the humans to fail. That as the human ships descended toward the Deathworld, the first signs of the planet's hostile atmosphere began to appear. The thick clouds swirled in ominous patterns, and lightning flashed across the sky. The surface of the planet was covered in jagged mountains, vast deserts, and swamps filled with dangerous creatures. The humans had no idea what awaited them. They were entering a world where survival was impossible. One of the human commanders, Captain Wells, stood at the front of the transport ship, looking out at the planet below. He had been briefed on the mission but had no idea what kind of planet they were going to. He thought it would be just another exploration mission, like the countless others humanity had undertaken in the past. But now, as he gazed out at the swirling clouds, a deep sense of unease crept into his mind. "Do you think we'll make it?" one of the crew members asked, standing beside him. Wells didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the planet below, his mind racing. He knew that the chances of survival were slim. No one had ever returned from a Class 15 Deathworld. The environment was too dangerous, the creatures too deadly. And yet, something in the back of his mind told him that he couldn't give up. Humanity had always survived against the odds before. Maybe, just maybe, they could survive this too. "We'll make it," he said finally, though his voice lacked the confidence he wanted to convey. "We have to." The crew around him nodded, but none of them truly believed it. As the ship began its final descent, they prepared for the worst. The alien commanders were watching closely, their eyes glued to the holographic screens in front of them. They had activated the monitoring devices, ready to observe the humans. Every move, the countdown began, the seconds ticking away as they waited for the first signs of failure. The aliens were prepared to watch as the humans were consumed by the planet's deadly forces. But what they didn't know was that the humans were not as weak as they thought. The humans weren't just survivors, they were problem solvers, innovators, and fighters, the aliens were about to learn that underestimating humanity would be their biggest mistake. As the human ships touched down on the planet's surface, the first signs of trouble for the aliens began to show. The humans, despite being thrown into the most hostile environment they had ever encountered, didn't immediately perish. Instead, they gathered their strength, their willpower, and began to adapt. But the aliens, this was the beginning of a long and unexpected battle. They had thought the humans would die quickly. But as they watched the humans start to set up camp and organize their efforts, they realized something that they hadn't expected. Humans never gave up. The mission had begun, but nothing was going as the aliens had hoped. The harsh winds of the Deathworld whipped across the landscape as the humans slowly began to adjust to their new environment. The alien commanders, watching from afar, couldn't help but feel a sense of confusion. The humans had touched down on the planet with nothing more than basic survival gear. Yet there they were, already starting to make the best of the situation. No one had anticipated this. Captain Derek Wells stood at the forefront of the small group, looking around at the rocky, barren terrain. The air was thin, and the temperature fluctuated wildly between scorching heat and freezing cold. Despite the many dangers they had been warned about, the humans were not crumbling. Instead, they were forming a plan. The crew's initial fear had turned into determination. They would survive. At first, their efforts were small. They gathered what little food they could find, using their limited knowledge of the terrain. But as they began to settle into their new surroundings, something strange happened. The humans, using their resourcefulness, adapted faster than anyone could have imagined. They had never faced anything like this, but they had faced adversity before. Survival had always been their strongest instinct, and now, that instinct was guiding them through this hostile land. In the distance, the first signs of a storm appeared on the horizon. Thick black clouds gathered, swirling violently above them. The alien commanders had known this would happen, anticipating that the storm would crush the humans, just as it had wiped out other species. Yet the humans didn't panic. Instead, they worked together, securing their camp, reinforcing the shelters they had quickly constructed out of materials they had scavenged. They were ready. As the storm approached, it became clear that the humans were not only surviving, were learning. They had fashioned crude tools. Using the native rocks and metals they found scattered across the planet, they had constructed makeshift weapons for defense. Knowing the planet was teeming with dangerous creatures, they were no longer just visitors on this death world. They had become part of it. It was as if the planet itself had accepted them. When the storm finally hit, it came with a vengeance. The winds howled, tearing through the makeshift shelters, while the ground shook beneath their feet. The alien commanders watched, convinced that this would be the end of the humans. But when the storm passed and the dust settled, they were stunned to see the humans emerge, battered but alive. What the aliens didn't understand was that the humans had been through worse. The storms, the creatures, the hostile environments were not new challenges. Humanity had faced similar struggles before, and each time they had found a way to overcome them. Their resilience wasn't just about physical strength, it was about their ability to adapt, to learn, and to work together. As the days turned into weeks, the humans began to understand the patterns of the Deathworld. They learned to predict the storms, the wildlife, and the shifts in the terrain. They adapted quickly, improving their shelters, finding new food sources, and even learning how to navigate the planet's hazardous landscape. The once deadly world was slowly becoming more familiar to them. Meanwhile, the alien commanders began to realize that they had underestimated their enemies. The humans were not just surviving, they were thriving. Their numbers were slowly increasing. As more of the crew adjusted to the planet's strange ecosystem, they were learning how to use the planet's resources in ways that the aliens had never expected. One day, as the humans explored a nearby canyon, they made a shocking discovery. At the base of the canyon, they found strange, glowing plants that seemed to have properties that could heal wounds and diseases. They collected samples, bringing them back to their camp, where they began experimenting with them. The plants were unlike anything the humans had ever seen, but they had a natural instinct for finding solutions, and they quickly realized that these plants could be used to treat injuries, boost their immune systems, and even improve their physical strength. This discovery was a game changer. The humans began to grow stronger, more resilient. They used the plants to help heal wounds, increase their stamina, and enhance their ability to survive. With each passing day, their confidence grew. The Deathworld no longer seemed so unforgiving. The humans had found a way to turn its harsh environment to their advantage. The alien commanders, still watching from their ships, were beginning to panic. The humans had not only survived their first tests, they were thriving. What had been intended as a simple mission to eliminate a weak species had become a nightmare for the aliens. They had never encountered anything like this before. The humans were defying all expectations. They had not just adapted to the planet, they were beginning to conquer it. The situation was now out of control. The alien commanders, who had expected the humans to perish within days, were faced with an unexpected truth. The humans were not the helpless creatures they had assumed. Instead, they were proving to be a force to be reckoned with. The alien fleet, once full of confidence, was now filled with doubt. Back on the Deathworld, the humans were just beginning to realize the full extent of what they had achieved. They had not only survived a deadly environment, but they had begun to thrive in it. They had found food, built shelter, and discovered a way to heal themselves. They had faced the worst the planet could throw at them and come out stronger. Humans now stood at the edge of something incredible. The Deathworld, once a place of unimaginable terror, had become a test that they had passed. But what they didn't know was that this was just the beginning. They had no idea that their survival had caught the attention of the alien fleet, and soon, the true challenge would begin. The aliens had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn that humans were not just survivors, they were conquerors. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the barren land, the humans gathered together, knowing that they had proven something important not just to the aliens, but to themselves. They were not defeated, they were just getting started, and whatever the aliens threw at them next, they would be ready. The humans had already surpassed what anyone, including themselves, thought possible. Weeks had turned into months, and the Deathworld, once an unforgiving nightmare, had transformed into a battleground where they were no longer merely surviving but thriving. The planet's terrifying creatures and deadly storms still posed a threat, but the humans had learned to use them to their advantage. It was as though they had become a part of the planet adapted to its every dangerous curve and unpredictable hazard. Now, the humans were not just living on the planet, they were starting to dominate it. Back on the alien ships, the commanders watched in disbelief as the humans continued to defy their expectations. What had begun as a simple experiment, a quick test to prove their superiority, had turned into something far more dangerous. The humans were adapting too quickly, their numbers growing steadily as they built new settlements and formed a community that was flourishing. It wasn't just that the humans were surviving, they were learning and evolving in ways that even the most advanced alien minds had not anticipated. The alien fleet was now on high alert, their confidence beginning to crack. The commanders debated what to do next. They had sent waves of deadly creatures, unleashed storms, and even manipulated the terrain to make survival impossible. Yet, the humans had overcome each of these challenges, and worse, they were getting stronger. A sense of fear began to take root among the alien commanders, an emotion they had not known in centuries. How could this be? How could a species so weak, so primitive, have outlasted everything the galaxy's most powerful forces could throw at them? The humans, however, remained unaware of the growing panic among the aliens. They had been focused entirely on surviving the planet's deadly forces, unaware that their actions were being closely monitored. But as the humans continued to evolve, it became clear that something was changing. They were no longer just fighting the planet's harsh elements, they were beginning to fight back against the forces that had sent them there in the first place. It started with a simple observation. A lone human scout had discovered something that the aliens had overlooked. Deep in the jungle, hidden within the thicket of poisonous plants and venomous creatures, there was a strange energy source. It wasn't just an ordinary power source, it was something far more advanced. The scout, a young woman named Amelia, had no idea what it was at first, but she knew it was important. She had been trained in basic exploration techniques, and when she first came across the source, it was so unlike anything the humans had seen before that she felt a strange chill run down her spine. Amelia sent word back to her comrades, and soon, a small group of humans ventured into the jungle to investigate further. They found a hidden complex, buried beneath the roots of massive trees and covered in alien technology. It wasn't just a shelter or a power source, it was an old alien facility, one that had been abandoned long before the humans had arrived. The discovery was groundbreaking. The humans had stumbled upon something that the aliens had long since forgotten, or perhaps never intended for anyone to find. The humans quickly realized that they had uncovered an advanced alien weapon system that could potentially turn the tide in their favor. They carefully studied the technology, using their ingenuity to reverse engineer it. As they worked, they marveled at how this technology, once used by the aliens to dominate countless worlds, could now be used by the humans to defend themselves and reclaim control over the planet that had once been their death sentence. But even as they worked to harness this power, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The alien commanders were aware of the humans' discovery, and they were not about to let it go unchecked. The aliens had already sent waves of their most dangerous soldiers to eliminate the humans, but now they had to deal with something far more threatening: an armed, intelligent enemy that had access to their own technology. As the humans began to unlock the secrets of the alien facility, the atmosphere shifted. There was a growing sense of unease, not just from the humans, but from the aliens as well. The humans had started out as weak, helpless creatures who had no business being on a Deathworld, but now they were becoming a force that the aliens could not ignore. The humans had taken something that was never meant for them and had turned it into a weapon. The alien commanders, once so sure of their victory, now faced a new and terrifying prospect. The humans were no longer just survivors, they were contenders for dominance. The first test came sooner than anyone expected. The aliens, realizing the danger the humans now posed, launched an attack. They sent in a new fleet, a swarm of heavily armed ships designed to wipe out the humans once and for all. The alien fleet descended from the sky like an unstoppable storm, their weapons primed and ready. It was a show of force, a demonstration of the power the aliens held over the humans. But the humans were ready. Using the alien technology they had scavenged from the hidden facility, the humans launched their own counter-offensive. Their newly crafted weapons, once rudimentary and primitive, now rivaled the alien fleet's advanced technology. The first battle between the two forces was fierce, with explosions lighting up the sky as the humans fought back with everything they had. The humans, despite being vastly outnumbered, fought like warriors who had everything to lose. The alien commanders, watching from their warships, were stunned. The humans, far from being helpless victims, were showing a level of coordination and skill that they hadn't expected. The tide was turning, and it was clear that the humans were no longer the prey, they were the hunters. The aliens had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. The battle raged on, but the humans' resilience and cunning had proven to be more than a match for the alien fleet. As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the humans stood victorious, their first true taste of battle complete. They had not only survived the Deathworld but had begun to conquer it, and as the alien fleet retreated, nursing its wounds, the humans knew that the worst was yet to come. The aliens had made a mistake in underestimating them, and now they would see just how dangerous humanity could be. The dust had barely settled when the humans received an unexpected message. It was a signal, faint and broken, but it was a message nonetheless. The human scouts, now more attuned to the planet's mysterious energy signatures, detected the transmission, coming from deep within the jungle. This was no ordinary distress call, it was an encrypted message, originating from the very aliens who had sent them to the Deathworld in the first place. The transmission was brief and cryptic, yet it carried a sense of urgency. The words were unmistakable. The experiment has gone too far. You are not the ones we feared. The truth must be known. Meet us at the coordinates. It is the only way to stop them. At first, the humans were skeptical. Why would the aliens, the very ones who had tried to wipe them out, reach out now? But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The battle they had just fought against the alien fleet had shaken the foundation of the alien empire. Their unrelenting push for dominance had been challenged by a species they considered weak and expendable. If there was a way to turn the tables, to get to the heart of the conflict, they had to know what the aliens were offering. Captain Derek Wells, now fully aware of the stakes, made the call. The humans would investigate the source of the message. No one knew what they would find, but the thought of learning more about the aliens' true intentions was too valuable to ignore. He gathered a small, trusted team of soldiers, engineers, and scientists, all of whom had played a critical role in the humans' survival on the Deathworld. They boarded a transport ship and set course for the coordinates embedded in the alien message. Leaving their newly built settlement behind, they had faced many challenges on the planet, but this would be different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding the game the aliens were playing, and how to turn the tide in their favor. The journey to the coordinates took several days, with the team navigating treacherous terrain and avoiding the deadly creatures that roamed the jungle. As they traveled, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, an unsettling sense that they were not alone. The planet's hostile forces were no longer the only threat they had to contend with. The aliens who had once watched from the safety of their ships were now facing a human resistance that was stronger, more resilient. and better equipped than anyone could have predicted. Finally, they arrived at the coordinates. It was a desolate area, a large open field surrounded by towering cliffs. The air felt heavier here, charged with an electric hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. As they disembarked, they noticed strange markings etched into the ground, alien symbols that seemed to pulse with an eerie glow. The markings led them to a massive, half-buried structure, something ancient and long forgotten. It was a facility, one that seemed to predate even the alien race that had originally sent them to this world. It was as if they had stumbled upon a hidden chapter of the galaxy's forgotten history, with careful steps. The team entered the facility. The doors groaned as they opened, revealing a dark, cold interior. Inside, they found rows of alien technology, many of which seemed to be dormant, as though waiting for someone to awaken them. But what caught their attention wasn't the technology itself, it was the data stored on the walls, etched into the very fabric of the building. A series of holographic projections flickered to life as they entered the main chamber, revealing a history that was far darker than anything they could have imagined. The holograms revealed a startling truth. The alien race that had sent the humans to this world was not the first to occupy it. Long before them, another species, one far older and more powerful, had called the Deathworld home. This ancient race had created the planet as a test ground for their own purposes, using it to cultivate the strongest, most ruthless creatures. But something went wrong. The creatures, once under control, turned on their creators. The ancient species was wiped out, their empire lost to time, and now the aliens who had sent the humans here were trying to repeat history. They believed they could control the Deathworld, but they had underestimated its true power. The message was becoming clear. The humans weren't just part of an experiment, they were part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. The Deathworld was not just a place of deadly creatures and hostile environments. It was a weapon, a place where species were pitted against each other to determine who would survive. The aliens had sent them here because they wanted to see how far humanity could push back. They were hoping that the humans would fail, but now the tables had turned. As the holographic projections continued, the team learned that the ancient race had left behind a legacy, a blueprint for a weapon of unimaginable power. This weapon was hidden somewhere on the planet, and the aliens believed that if they could uncover it, they would finally be able to control the Deathworld and use it to dominate the galaxy. But the weapon wasn't meant to be wielded by just anyone. It had to be unlocked by the right species, one that could survive the trials of the Deathworld and prove themselves worthy. And that's when it hit them. The humans weren't just survivors, they were the key. They were the ones who had passed the trials, who had defied the odds. The Deathworld had chosen them, and now they were in a position to either stop the aliens or unlock the weapon themselves. But with that power came a great responsibility. Could they control the weapon, or would it consume them as it had the ancient species? The team stood in stunned silence, the weight of their discovery sinking in. They had come here to find answers, but what they had uncovered was something far greater. The fate of the galaxy, the future of humanity, and the balance of power now rested in their hands. They had learned too much to turn back, but they also knew that their next steps would determine everything. The humans had always been resilient, but now they were facing a choice that could change the course of their future. Would they use the power they had found to fight back against the aliens, or would they risk unleashing something far more dangerous? The journey was no longer just about survival, it was about making the right choice in the face of overwhelming power. The battle had only just begun. The discovery had shifted the balance in ways that no one could have foreseen. The human team stood in the heart of the ancient facility, surrounded by relics of a forgotten civilization. The message had been clear. The Deathworld wasn't just a test, it was a weapon, and the humans were now at the center of a cosmic game they hadn't signed up for. As the gravity of the situation settled in, the once clear path ahead now appeared shrouded in uncertainty. The power to either protect or destroy the galaxy lay within their grasp, and yet the questions they faced were overwhelming. What if they were not ready? What if the power they had discovered was too dangerous to control? As they navigated the intricacies of the alien structure, the reality of their newfound role began to sink in. The once optimistic sense of triumph they had felt in surviving the Deathworld faded, replaced by a gnawing fear. The Deathworld had been a test, yes, but it had also been a trap. The aliens, who had assumed they were in control, were now scrambling to catch up. The humans had not just survived, they had found a hidden weapon, one that could either save or doom them. But this weapon wasn't just technology, it was part of a much larger, darker plan. Captain Derek Wells felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The team had come here to understand the aliens' motives, to learn why they had been sent to this forsaken planet. They had found more than they had bargained for. He looked around at his crew, the faces that had once been filled with hope now etched with doubt and uncertainty. They had fought for survival, but this was something different. They were no longer fighting to stay alive. Now, they had to decide whether they would use the power they had found, or whether they would destroy it before it could be used against them. As they moved deeper into the heart of the facility, the team discovered more clues about the ancient species that had created the Death. The holographic projections showed the final moments of their civilization, once a thriving empire, now reduced to ruins. The Deathworld had been their greatest creation, a place where they had pushed the boundaries of life and death, strength and survival, but their ambition had led them down a dark path. The creatures they had created had turned against them, destroying everything in their wake. The weapon they had left behind was their last hope, but it had remained dormant, waiting for the right species to unlock its power. The humans had unwittingly become the key. They had passed the trials of the Deathworld, a series of survival challenges that no other species had managed to overcome. Now, they stood at the crossroads of fate, with the ability to either destroy the weapon or harness it. The decision was not easy. They had been through so much, fought so hard to stay alive, and now, they were faced with the possibility of wielding power that could change everything. Meanwhile, back on the alien fleet, the commanders were beginning to realize the gravity of the situation. They had sent wave after wave of deadly creatures, unleashed storms, and manipulated the planet's environment to ensure the humans' failure. But the humans were not only surviving, they were evolving, adapting to the planet's challenges, and now they had discovered the ancient weapon. The alien commanders had made a crucial mistake. They had underestimated humanity. They believed that the humans would fall, just as every other species had before them, but instead, the humans had become a force to be reckoned with. With the discovery of the weapon, the alien fleet found itself in an unexpected position. The humans had the upper hand, and the aliens knew that they needed to act quickly. They couldn't afford to let the humans gain control of the Deathworld's weapon, for if they did, it would mean the end of their empire. The power to control the Deathworld was too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. The aliens had to neutralize the humans, but they no longer had the advantage. They had lost their sense of control, and now, they had to make a desperate move. Captain Wells and his team, meanwhile, were preparing for what was to come. They knew that the aliens would not let them continue unchecked. They had to act before the alien fleet could respond, but they also knew that the weapon they had uncovered was unlike anything they had ever seen. It had the potential to shift the balance of power in the galaxy, but it was a double-edged sword. Using it could either secure humanity's place in the universe, or destroy everything they had fought for. As they stood in the heart of the facility, Wells felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He looked around at his crew, each one grappling with their own fears and doubts. The weapon they had found was powerful, but it wasn't just a tool. It was a force, a living entity in its own right. To use it would mean embracing the unknown, accepting the consequences of their actions, for better or for worse. The team worked tirelessly, analyzing the weapon and its potential. They knew that once they activated it, there would be no turning back. The weapon could change the course of history, but it could also be their undoing. As the days passed, they continued to study the ancient technology, unlocking its secrets bit by bit. Every new discovery made them both more certain and more afraid of what they were dealing with, but time was running out. The alien fleet was gathering, preparing to strike. The humans were out of time. They had to make their decision now. Would they use the weapon to defeat the aliens once and for all, or would they destroy it, ensuring that no one, not even humanity, could wield its terrible power? As the final battle loomed, the humans knew that whatever they chose, the universe would never be the same. The Deathworld had been a test, but it was more than that. It was a turning point. The humans had fought to survive, but now they were fighting for control over a power that could shape the future of the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher, and the choices they made in the coming hours would echo across the stars. The alien fleet hovered silently in the skies, like a storm ready to break. Below, the humans continued to work, unaware of the looming threat that was about to descend upon them. They had unlocked the secrets of the Deathworld, and now, with the weapon in their possession, they stood on the brink of something unimaginable. The once primitive humans had evolved into something far greater than the aliens had ever anticipated. They had adapted, learned, and even gained control of the very forces meant to destroy them. But as the days passed, the shadows of the alien fleet grew darker, and the tension between them and humanity reached a boiling point. On the surface, Captain Derek Wells and his team were grappling with a decision that could alter the fate of every living being in the galaxy. They had the weapon, an ancient tool of destruction, dormant for centuries, but now fully awakened. It pulsed with an eerie energy, its power a mix of alien technology and unknown forces. Wells stood over the weapon, his hands trembling slightly. He knew the stakes. Using it could mean humanity's survival, but at what cost? If they unleashed its power, it could turn the tide in the battle against the alien fleet. But if they failed to control it, if it consumed them the way it had consumed the ancient species, the consequences would be catastrophic. The team worked feverishly to activate the weapon, their minds racing with the possibilities. Every moment that passed felt like a countdown to an inevitable clash. Wells couldn't shake the feeling that the humans had become the ultimate prey in a game they hadn't chosen to play, yet they were in it now. The alien fleet, once so confident in its superiority, had underestimated the resilience and ingenuity of humanity. Now they were about to face the full force of a species that had not only survived, but had risen to challenge them in ways they couldn't have imagined. Back in orbit, the alien commanders were desperate. They had sent waves of their deadliest forces to quell the humans, but with each assault, the humans had only grown stronger. Now, the alien fleet was in disarray. The humans, using the very weapons the aliens had sought to destroy them with, were starting to turn the tide. The once unstoppable force of the alien empire was beginning to fracture. Each alien ship that fell was a symbol of the power the humans had managed to harness. But it wasn't just the weapon that had given the humans the advantage. It was their unyielding determination, their refusal to back down in the face of insurmountable odds. The alien commanders knew they had only one option left. They had to launch a final all-out assault, an attack so powerful that it would obliterate the humans and their newfound weapon. The fleet, once a symbol of alien supremacy, was now the last line of defense for a race on the verge of collapse. With the weapon in the humans' hands, the very balance of power in the galaxy was at risk. The tension on the ground was palpable as Wells and his team stood before the weapon. They could feel the pulse of energy coursing through the air, an almost living force that hummed with promise and danger. "We're ready," Wells said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation, but inside, he wasn't so sure. What if activating the weapon was the wrong move? What if it was too much for humanity to handle? His thoughts were interrupted as the ground trembled beneath their feet. The aliens had made their move. A massive fleet of warships descended from the skies, their engines roaring like thunder, ready to crush the humans beneath their might. The humans had expected this. They knew the aliens wouldn't stop until they were eliminated, but what they didn't expect was that the humans, empowered by the weapon, were ready to meet them head-on. As the first wave of alien ships touched down, the ground shook with an intensity that rattled the human base. Explosions rang out, and the air filled with the deafening roar of battle. The humans, using the technology they had recovered from the Deathworld, fought back with a force they had never before known. The weapon they had uncovered, a tool of ancient power, thrummed with energy, amplifying their weapons and giving them an edge that no one could have predicted. It was as if the planet itself was on their side, willing them to fight back, to take a stand against the overwhelming alien force. The alien fleet, once so sure of its victory, was now being pushed back. Every shot fired by the humans felt like a defiance of the odds, a testament to their refusal to bow down. The weapon, despite its danger, had given the humans the strength they needed, but it also came with a cost. The weapon's power was overwhelming, threatening to spiral out of control if not carefully monitored. Each use drained their resources, each activation brought them closer to the point of no return. And yet, despite the risks, the humans pressed on. Wells watched from a distance as the battle raged. His mind was clear now, the uncertainty gone. He knew that they couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. This was the moment. The weapon had to be used to its fullest extent, or the humans would be lost forever. With a determined expression, he gave the order to launch the weapon's full power. The sky above them erupted in a blinding flash of light as the weapon unleashed its energy, sending a shockwave that rippled through the alien fleet. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The air crackled with energy as the alien ships were ripped apart by the sheer force of the blast. It was a display of power unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans, using the very weapon that had once been their doom, had now turned the tide of the battle. The alien fleet was shattered, its ships falling from the sky, consumed by the power of the Deathworld weapon. But as the smoke cleared and the final remnants of the alien fleet disintegrated, the humans realized the true cost of their victory. The weapon had been powerful, but it had come at a price. The Deathworld, once a test of survival, had become a battleground that would forever change the course of history. The humans had won, but they had done so by unlocking forces they could barely control. The victory was bittersweet. They had defeated the alien invaders, but at what cost? The weapon that had saved them had also opened a door to a future fraught with uncertainty. The Deathworld had been a place of trials and challenges, but now, it was a place of power and danger, and the humans, standing amidst the wreckage of the alien fleet, knew that the battle for their future was far from over. The air was thick with dust and smoke, the remnants of the great battle that had just unfolded. The Deathworld, which had once seemed like an unyielding, hostile place, now felt strangely silent, almost as if the planet itself were holding its breath. Captain Derek Wells stood at the center of the battlefield, his eyes scanning the wreckage of the alien fleet that lay scattered around him. The weapon they had unleashed had turned the tide of the war. But now, as the dust began to settle, Wells couldn't shake the feeling that their victory came with an unspoken cost. The once glaring oppressive power of the alien fleet was no longer present in its place. The remnants of their ships lay like shattered bones, scattered across the barren landscape. Alien bodies littered the ground, their once imposing forms reduced to nothing more than the aftermath of their failure. The humans, though battered and bruised, stood victorious, but at what price? Wells turned his gaze toward the sky, where the last remnants of the alien ships drifted in the atmosphere. The fleet had been all but decimated, leaving no question about humanity's strength. Yet, the silence that followed the chaos felt deafening. There was no triumph in the air, only the uncertainty of what would come next. What now? After they had won, the humans had defeated their greatest enemy, but the consequences of their actions were far-reaching. They had uncovered the ancient weapon of the Deathworld, and with it, they had not only defended themselves, but dismantled the alien invaders. However, the weapon was not just a tool, it was a force of unimaginable power. And though they had used it to save themselves, Wells knew that this power could easily be corrupted. The balance of the universe had shifted, and the consequences of wielding such power were unknown. As the humans began to regroup, tending to their wounded and salvaging what they could from the battlefield, Wells couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. They had been sent to this planet as nothing more than test subjects, pawns in a cruel experiment. But now, they had turned the tables. They had fought back against the aliens, not as victims, but as conquerors. But the victory was not a simple one. It was one that had required great sacrifice. The alien commanders, once so certain of their victory, had underestimated the humans at every turn. They had sent wave after wave of their most powerful forces, hoping to break humanity's spirit. But instead, the humans had become stronger with each battle. They had adapted, using their intelligence and ingenuity to survive and eventually, to thrive. And now, as they stood over the wreckage of their enemies, they had proven that no force, no matter how powerful, could keep them down. But even as Wells reveled in their hard-earned victory, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Deathworld, with all its challenges and horrors, had become more than just a battleground. It had become a place of transformation, a place where humanity had not only fought for survival but had awakened something far greater than themselves. The weapon they had found on this planet, this force that had once been a harbinger of doom, had now become a part of their identity. The humans had taken it, unlocked it, and turned it against their foes. But what would they do with it now? What would the galaxy think when they learned what the humans had unleashed? Wells didn't have the answers. The fate of humanity was no longer in the hands of the alien commanders or the weapon they had discovered. It was in the hands of the humans themselves. They had control now. They could choose how to wield this new power, how to shape their future. But the question remained, would they use it to create a new era of peace, or would they fall into the same traps that had ensnared the ancient civilizations before them? As the days passed, the humans began to rebuild. They had lost many of their own in the battle, but they had gained something more precious, a sense of unity. They had faced the impossible and come out victorious, not because of brute strength, but because of their collective will to survive. The Deathworld had taught them that they were capable of far more than they had ever realized. It had tested their resolve, their endurance, and their ability to adapt, and in the end, it had made them stronger. But even as they rebuilt, the shadows of the past loomed over them. The weapon they had uncovered, though a symbol of their triumph, was also a reminder of the thin line between power and destruction. It was not just a tool of war, it was a force that could change the galaxy forever. The humans had been tested, and they had passed. But now, As they looked ahead to the future, they knew that they would have to be careful. The weapon's power was intoxicating, and the temptation to use it recklessly could lead to their downfall. Wells knew that the galaxy would be watching. The aliens they had defeated were not the only force that had an interest in the Deathworld's power. Other species, other empires, would come, drawn by the same hunger for control, and the humans would have to decide whether they would stand alone or whether they would join the struggle for dominance. The weapon was theirs to wield, but the question remained, would they use it to protect themselves, or would they become the very thing they had fought against? As the sun began to set over the Deathworld, casting a blood-red glow across the horizon, Wells stood alone, looking out over the battlefield. The war was over, but the battle for humanity's future had just begun. They had proven that they could survive the worst, but now they would have to prove that they could survive themselves. The choice was theirs whether they would continue to fight for survival, or whether they would become something more. The galaxy, with all its dangers and temptations, awaited.